Incredible rescue. How a U.S. Marine transformed a blizzard nightmare for a mother and her 3 kids. As snow fell relentlessly, Sarah looked through the cracked window pane, dread pooling in her gut. Yesterday's weather report had warned of a blizzard, her worst nightmare come to life. They can't see us like this. Not now. She brushed away a stray tear and turned to check on her children. They sat wrapped in fraying blankets on the scuffed living room floor, a makeshift pillow fort fortifying their laughter from the oppressive cold outside. She hated how thin her walls were. They felt like a sieve, letting in every gust of wind and sigh of defeat. She worked at a local diner, flipping burgers and pouring coffee, earning just enough to fill their stomachs. But here at home, it was a different story. The roof leaked, water stains mottled the ceiling. Each drip echoed her fears. Trouble with the landlord, bills piling up, the constant threat of eviction looming like the storm outside. She balanced the emotional weight. Was she enough for her kids? That question haunted her long after the diner lights dimmed. The wind howled, and her youngest Lucy looked up wide-eyed. "Mommy, what if the snow gets higher than the door?" The question struck a chord, dancing with Sarah's fears, amplifying the knot in her stomach. "It's all right, Lucy. We're safe inside." But the facade felt shaky, as though the very foundation of their home would cave in around her. Would the storm swallow them whole? As the blizzard raged on, Sarah turned to the radio for respite. An announcement cut through her thoughts. If anyone needs assistance during the blizzard, please call for help. Her heart raced, a flutter of hopelessness blossoming. Would she ever be able to reach out like that? To ask for help? Her hands trembled as she gripped the remote. If only someone would swoop in with the courage to rescue them. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Outside, Corporal Mike battled against the swirling snow, torn between the safety of his vehicle and the inexplicable urge to act. He had served his country, but now he sought purpose in a different way, one that called him to help those who needed it. As he navigated through the storm, he recalled his grandparents' lessons, loyalty and duty, but the weight of them felt heavier now. Each step summoned memories not of glory, but of abandonment, loss, and inner demons. The realization crashed over him. He wanted to feel alive again, to reclaim that part of himself buried under layers of regret. As he closed in on the distress call, uncertainty knotted in his gut. What if he wasn't enough? What if he failed? Each gust of wind mirrored Sarah's fears. He could envision her as he trudged forward, a mother fighting against despair, wrapped in uncertainty. The flicker of hope shared between them was fragile, caught in the howling chaos of the storm. When he finally reached her home, the sight of a family huddled together, spirits weighed down, stirred something deep within him. As he knocked on the flimsy door, the rattle echoed through the empty space, burdened with questions neither could escape. Would they find strength amid the storm, or would this blizzard sweep them apart forever? The wind howled around him, and he took a deep breath, heart pounding as he stepped into the frigid threshold, clutching hope tightly in his hands. As Mike stepped into the dim, cold interior, his senses were assaulted by the scent of dampness and despair. The dim light revealed the scattered remnants of a home battling against the elements. Each droplet of water clinging to the ceiling, every creak of the floorboard seemed to echo the weight of worry pressing down on Sarah. She stood frozen in the doorway, uncertainty etched across her face, a stark contrast to the warmth he hoped to bring. "Are you okay?" he asked, immediately regretting how generic the question sounded against the backdrop of her fear. Her eyes flickered with disbelief, glancing between him and her children, as if weighing the reliability of this stranger against the enormity of her predicament. I don't know if we are," she finally managed, her voice barely more than a whisper. The sight of her, brimming with resolve yet trembling, stirred something deep within Mike. He could feel the memories flooding back to him, his comrades, battling forces that felt insurmountable, the moments of fear that had tested their very essence. This was different, yet no less vital. He wasn't just here to save them from the cold. He could be a catalyst for change. "I'm here to help. We'll figure this out together," he stated earnestly, recognizing the truth in that sentence even as questions clawed at his mind. How? He had no exact plan, only a burgeoning need to be the anchor she needed. The kids peered out from their fort, their curiosity remarkably bright against the gloom. He knelt to meet their wide, frightened eyes, wanting to deflect their worries for a moment. "What kind of adventures do you have planned for today, superheroes?" he asked, forcing a smile. They exchanged uncertain glances but began to relax, encouraged by his presence. "We're building a snow fort," said the oldest, a boy with an earnestness that reminded Mike of his younger self. But then the snow got way too high. "Well, it sounds like you need a teammate," he replied, his tone light yet purposeful. This simple exchange planted a seed of trust, not just for the children, but for Sarah as well. If they could foster hope, maybe that would allow her to breathe again. Mike turned back to Sarah, seriousness settling back into his demeanor. "First, we need to check for leaks, make sure you have enough food. It doesn't seem right for a family like yours to go through this alone." Sarah let out a shaky breath, something shifted behind her eyes, a spark of determination flickering to life. "I don't want to be a burden," she said, more to herself than to him. It was a familiar statement, one that echoed in countless households, a sentiment Mike knew far too well. "You're not a burden," he asserted, channeling the confidence that had once propelled him through perilous situations. "Accepting help is a strength, not a weakness. Let me help you." With each word, Mike felt the barrier between them dissolve a little more, recognized the transformative power of vulnerability. As Sarah hesitated, he caught a glimpse of something deeper. Her fears were layered, the worry of her children's future wrapped in an urgent need for stability. He understood that this moment wasn't about simply finding a roof over their heads. It was also about reigniting a spark of hope. As they began their earnest work assessing the damage, their bond deepened in a way neither fully comprehended. Each decision Steve made, where to put her, how to help them find warmth, emanated from a well of experience buried under years of conflict and emotional turmoil. In that act of service, he began finding pieces of his purpose once lost. Suddenly Mike paused, a noise drifting from outside, an unexpected crack followed by the sound of something heavy slipping. The storm's fury felt like it was tightening its grip outside, but there was something about that noise, something that sparked unease. What was that? Sarah's eyes widened, mirroring his trepidation as a new wave of challenge loomed, one that could threaten not just her fragile home, but the very fabric of the hope that had begun to knit them together amidst the storm. Mike stepped forward, determination hardening his resolve. The moment had come to face whatever lay outside, and with it, a reckoning of personal demons yet to be confronted. But in that instant, he realized he was no longer just fighting for his own redemption. He was also fighting for Sarah and her children. Would they be able to weather not just the storm outside, but the uncertainties of their intertwined lives? The door to possibility began to creak open, but what awaited them on the other side remained dangerously unpredictable. The chill in the air intensified as Mike opened the door, exposing the tempest that valiantly raged outside. The howling wind contrasted sharply with the quiet resolve blossoming within him. He could feel the weight of responsibility settle even heavier across his shoulders. This was no longer just a helping hand. It was potential salvation for a family on the brink. As his foot stepped cautiously into the icy unknown, the noise that had startled them earlier reverberated again, a deep crack that echoed like thunder amid the swirling snow. Mike felt the stirrings of anxiety, but he also sensed a familiar compulsion, the need to act. Each encounter with adversity in his past had honed his instincts. He recalled being in chaotic environments, relying on quick judgment and decisive action. Now he channeled that energy toward not just survival, but forging a semblance of stability for Sarah and her children. "Stay close to the door," he instructed Sarah, his voice steady despite the pounding elements. She seemed an anxious figure, shadows of fear still haunting her every thought. In that moment, he glimpsed more than just her vulnerable exterior. He recognized a fierce mother willing to protect her children at all costs. This realization ignited something in him. He had lost that sense of fierce protection in his own life, swept away by a tsunami of self-doubt after his service. But here, it was not just about him. It was about resurrecting that protective spirit in both of them. Mike ventured forward, bracing himself against the onslaught of ice-laden wind, squinting against the blinding white. He spotted a large birch tree, now partially uprooted, limbs sprawling unforgivingly toward the house. Time and again, disaster had taught him to assess risks and formulate plans, but this was different. He felt a sense of urgency, as if this moment held within it the potential to redefine not just their immediate situation, but also the trajectory of their lives. "Looks like the tree's come down, but I think it's mostly resting against the eaves," he called back, gauging Sarah's reaction as he moved closer. The combination of weight and pressure had to be evaluated quickly. He knew the neighboring houses would be checking in, but there wasn't time to rely on others. "If we can secure it, we might prevent further damage and keep you safe." As he maneuvered around the debris, he felt it. Each step was laced with determination, a reaffirmation of purpose. He wasn't merely fixing a house, he was safeguarding a family's future. That realization drove him forward, moving through the treacherous snow like it was a training ground, tapping into each memory that reminded him what resilience felt like. For the first time in years, his heart beat with intention rather than dread. Working swiftly, Mike grasped branches and tugged, testing their weight as he orchestrated a makeshift plan in his mind. He spoke aloud, providing a running commentary for Sarah to ease her fears, hoping to include her in the solution. "Can you help me gather some ropes?" He spotted the old shed behind the house, the door barely hanging on its hinges. "We can fashion a brace to hold the tree." Sarah blinked, obviously caught off guard by the urgency that embedded itself within Mike's words. But she nodded, determination creeping into her gaze as she joined him. As they worked together, he witnessed her demeanor shift. Each action she took seemed to push her anguish into the background, if only for a moment. In that exchange of effort, Mike felt a subtle yet profound transformation within himself. Gone was the man haunted by his past, traversing the shadows of regret and self-perception. He now stood as a collaborator in a shared mission. Each knot they tied held the dual meaning of physical security and emotional fortitude. But just as they secured the makeshift brace, a louder crack echoed through the air, sending a shiver not just down Mike's spine but also through Sarah, who jumped slightly beside him. An unexpected collapse from another part of the storm-worn tree sent a flurry of snow cascading toward them. The chaos of their environment intensified, threatening to unravel the safety they had just negotiated. "What was that?" Sarah's eyes darted to the sky, panic in her voice as the reality of their situation crashed around them. The storm was reaching a perilous crescendo, and Mike could feel an unsettling truth settling in. They had merely forestalled one challenge. But beyond the frigid barrier of wood and ice lay a deeper fight, a confrontation with the elements and their own fears. "No, we've got this," he urged quietly, feeling the adrenaline set in. "Let's take cover in the shed." With every step into the unknown, Mike realized how much was at stake, not just for Sarah and her children, but for himself. The storm was more than the physical threat of snow and ice. It represented his own ongoing battle with vulnerability and purpose. As they approached the shed, the storm seemed to breathe down their necks, and Mike couldn't shake the sense of imminent peril, one that would ultimately challenge their resilience, compel them to confront their past, and fortify their unsteady alliance. But as he prepared to open the door to a possible refuge, he couldn't help but wonder, would they merely survive the storm, or could this turmoil forge a deeper bond, igniting a radical transformation in all their lives? The answer lurked just beyond the fraying edges of that thin door. The door creaked open, revealing the dim confines of the shed, shadows dancing in the flickering light of a battery-operated lantern. As they stepped inside, Mike felt a sudden contrast from the chaos outside. The walls seemed to cradle them in a hesitant embrace. The air, still and slightly musty, buzzed with a tension that mirrored Mike's racing thoughts. "Stay close," he whispered, the sound swallowed by the shed's wooden walls. He could sense Sarah's apprehension. Her fingers fidgeted nervously against her coat. He marveled at how, under the weight of their circumstances, they had both become something more, a makeshift team, bound by the storm's relentless grip. Mike paced the small space, assessing their options. Broken tools littered the ground, stark reminders of neglect. But even as he scrutinized the disarray, he felt a shift within himself. Each discarded tool unlocked a memory, a lesson learned in resourcefulness from days in service when failure equated to danger. There was value in this disarray. It sparked a recollection of purpose, one he had long pushed aside. "Look for anything we can use to secure that tree," he said, regaining his command. "We'll need to keep the pressure off the house until the storm subsides." He moved with newfound determination, his focus narrowing to the task at hand. As Sarah rifled through the clutter and began assembling bits of rope and old pipes, Mike's mind began crafting scenarios, not just for the immediate crisis but for what lay ahead. Exceeding bare survival, he now envisioned rebuilding, not just the house physically, but the bonds that had been frayed by time and worry. "Here, this might work," Sarah said, holding up a rusted but sturdy pipe. She looked at him, and for a moment, their eyes locked. There was a glimmer of acknowledgement, a shared understanding that solidified their alliance. "Perfect," he replied, feeling a surge of energy. "We can use that to stabilize the tree's trunk." Together they worked tirelessly, Mike guiding Sarah's movements with both words and gestures. Each time she drew close, he could feel a faint warmth foster between them, a counterbalance to the icy winds clawing at the shed. She was not only a mother seeking refuge, she was a partner ready to fight. With every knot they tied and every plan they executed, Mike felt an unfamiliar sense of confidence unfurl within him. It was as if the act of creation, constructing physical barriers against nature's wrath, was gradually dismantling the barriers he had inadvertently fortified around his own heart. There were flashes of who he used to be, before the relentless march of regret had clouded his vision. The protector, the assertive planner. "There's something we need to talk about," he said, pausing for breath as he adjusted their improvised support. The gravity of his words hung in the air like icicles, sharp and inevitable. "What is it?" Sarah asked, furrowing her brow as she set the pipe down. "How we move forward after this." The words felt heavy but liberating. "This," he gestured at the chaotic storm outside. "It's a reflection of what we're battling, and it's not just physical." Sarah's eyes narrowed, taking in his meaning. "You think this is a moment of clarity? That we can just somehow emerge better?" "I think we have a choice," Mike replied, the sincerity behind his words reinforcing his conviction. "We can let the tremors of our past define us, or we can forge something new out of this chaos. We can decide to support each other, not just through storms." He paused, uncertain if he should reveal the depth of his feelings. "But in life." A moment of silence lingered, fractured only by the howling winds outside and their shared breaths, quickening with anticipation. "Do you really believe we can change?" she asked, a flicker of hope brushing against the edges of uncertainty. "I do, and I believe you can too," he answered, feeling the undeniable weight of his own words. Emphasizing the connection they had forged, he sensed they were on the cusp of something monumental. This blizzard was not just a tempest, but an opportunity, a defining crossroads laid bare by fate. As they journeyed deeper into this conversation, a low rumble echoed outside, shaking the shed and their fortitude. Mike's heart raced again, not from doubt, but with anticipation of confronting yet another external challenge. What if this moment propelled them into a revelation that forever altered their paths? He took a deep breath, the icy air filling him with empowerment. Together, they would face the truth of their situations. Together they could carve a new existence from the tempest surrounding them. But before they could address that mutual decision, they needed to first survive this storm, proving to themselves they were indeed more than the shadows of their pasts. "We'll need to get back outside soon," he said, finality punctuating his voice. With a shared nod that spoke volumes, they prepared to emerge once more into the blizzard, determined to confront not only the frigid elements, but their own fears of the future. As Mike stepped back toward the door, he glanced at Sarah, who stood resolute behind him. "No matter what awaits us out there," he cautioned, "prepare yourself. It's not just the storm we're enduring. It's truth." The moment the door flung open, Mike was hit not only by wind but by a profound realization. In bravery, transformation awaited them both, and his heart stirred with trepidation over what was to come. Would they face the storm outside with the same unity they forged within? The wind howled with an intensity that threatened to drown out Mike's thoughts as he and Sarah stepped back into the storm. Instinctively, he reached for her hand and squeezed it with the reassurance he hoped to convey. Together, they faced the blizzard, the swirling snow obscuring their vision and heightening their senses. "Stay close!" he shouted above the roar, leading her into the void of white. Every step was laborious, the weight of the snow shifting beneath their feet. It felt like they were wading through molasses, and Mike's heart pulsed with a combination of urgency and dread. He couldn't shake the feeling that every moment spent in the storm was a test, not merely of their physical strength, but of their will to confront what their futures might hold. "Where do we start?" Sarah called out, struggling to keep up with his determined pace. She was clearly pushing herself, but there was a resolve etched into her features that spoke volumes. "Head towards the edge of the property. We need to see how much damage that tree can do if it falls," Mike said, his mind racing as he considered what lay ahead. He was no longer just a man trying to survive. He was the architect of their escape, weaving the threads of survival from uncertainty and fear. As they reached the perimeter of the yard, Mike's breath caught. The enormous tree loomed ominously, swaying under the force of the wind, a gnarled giant burdened by the weight of the snow. He felt a rush of adrenaline. He could not let fear dictate their actions. Instead, he was fueled by a sacred duty to protect Sarah and her children, who were likely huddled safely indoors, unaware of the storm's true wrath. "Okay, let's figure out how to stabilize it. If it falls, it will crush everything in its path," he said, surveying the ground for any usable materials. There was a small stack of firewood nearby, dry and splintered, but sturdy enough to be reinforced with rope. Yet his mind wandered back to their earlier conversation, the one about choice. This wasn't just about survival. It was about action, about shaping their future from within the chaos. "Help me with this," he instructed, tossing some of the firewood toward Sarah, who caught it with both hands. She looked up, brow furrowed, but eyes alight with determination. Their partnership was solidifying further in the midst of the storm, and he felt a spark of hope ignite between them. As they worked, strapping the wood against the tree's trunk, he stole a glance at her, her face flushed from the cold, grit in her expression. It struck him that this was more than teamwork. It was a testament to her resilience, a quality he had overlooked in his own life for too long. She wasn't just a mother fighting for her kids. She was a force of nature, and together, they had strength he had almost forgotten he possessed. "Mike, I know we're in the middle of a storm, but do you really believe we can start over after this?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the blizzard. The question bore an emotional weight that settled heavily in the hollow of his chest. "Starting over isn't about leaving everything behind. It's about learning from the storm," he replied, his voice stronger than he felt. "It's about rediscovering who we are under the pressure. You've shown me that this fight to survive is just the beginning." The wind whipped around them, momentarily interrupting the intensity of their exchange, but Mike felt more at ease. This chaos, though terrifying, was teaching him to confront the fears he had tucked away: vulnerability, risk, and the potential for something new. "Let's finish securing this tree. Once we do that, I want to talk about what comes next," he urged, channeling the purpose he felt surging inside him, a potent mix of hope and determination. As they fastened the final knot, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was the first step into a bright, albeit uncertain future. Slowly, they made their way back towards the house, viscerally aware of every gust of wind, every banner of snow swirling around them. The battle outside was relentless, but what they faced within was more profoundly crucial. "How do we embrace everything waiting for us?" Sarah echoed, her voice quavering with a mix of hope and fear. Mike turned to her, a fierce resolve hardening in his stomach. "The time has come to confront the past, our pasts, together. Yet as they neared the house, the wind seemed to reach a new crescendo, and something shifted in the air. An unsettling feeling coursed through Mike. What awaited them inside was more daunting than the storm they had just weathered. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, taking a deep breath, fully aware that once they stepped inside, there would be no turning back. The blizzard might have covered their old lives in a thick layer of snow, but within that cold, there lay the potential to uncover something transformative, if they dared to dig deep enough. But as they reached for the door, another crash reverberated through the storm, a stark reminder that they were still grappling with forces they had yet to understand. Would they emerge confidently into the next chapter of their lives, or would the past reach out and drag them back into its vicious grip? Mike felt the weight of silence as they stepped into the house, the deafening storm outside fading into a distant roar. The door creaked ominously, leaving them momentarily cocooned in warmth while the icy chill clung to their clothes like ghosts from the past. Mike took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders as he surveyed the chaos around them, the disarray of their belongings strewn haphazardly, shadows of their former lives woven into the fabric of the now. "Let's start with the lights," he suggested, leading Sarah toward the dimly lit hallway. The flickering bulb overhead struggled against the suffocating darkness, mirroring the uncertainty that gripped Mike. Navigating the storm was one thing, but confronting the wreckage of their lives would require an entirely different kind of courage. As he fumbled with the electrical box, a nagging thought gnawed at him. What if their means of escape didn't start with reconstruction, but rather with reckoning? The idea resonated with him, unearthing layers of complexity he had avoided for too long. He could bury his past under the weight of practical tasks, but the storm had made it clear. To truly move forward, he needed to address the demons lurking in the shadows. "We'll need to gather supplies, start fixing up," he began. But his words faltered as he saw Sarah's eyes, sparkling with determination, yet veiled with doubt. "Right?" She looked thoughtful for a moment, then nodded. "We also need to talk about everything, the struggles, the moments we ran away from," she said, meeting his gaze with an intensity he hadn't anticipated. The thought of baring their souls felt like standing naked in front of the blizzard, raw, exposed, and utterly vulnerable. Still, Mike knew they were at a turning point. Shifting his stance, he planted his feet firmly on the ground and let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. "Let's do it," he said, his voice emerging steadier than before. "We need to face it all, together." They positioned themselves on opposite sides of the kitchen table, the heart of the home where countless conversations had occurred. The energy between them shifted as they prepared to unpack their experiences, their raw emotions swirling like the snowstorm outside. "I always thought I had to be strong alone," Mike recalled, "that asking for help was a sign of weakness. But I realized I've been hiding from my fear of failure instead of embracing it." Sarah nodded, her expression softening. "I felt that too. I had to put on a brave face for my kids, a perfect mother who never faltered. But the truth is, I was terrified and lost." As they exchanged tales of failed attempts and restless nights, revelations began to surface. Mike admired Sarah's resilience, her ability to grapple with her flaws while still fighting for her children. She challenged him to confront the inherent vulnerability that came with leadership. Leading others, yes, but also leading himself. Yet with each layer they peeled back, the memories of their previous shortcomings threatened to drown them anew. Mike intensely felt the weight of his past decisions, the regrets that had compounded over time. In what felt like an endless cycle of self-recrimination, he poured out his heart, revealing his guilt for not being enough, for retreating instead of rising to the occasion. "Are we just going to keep pointing fingers at our pasts?" he demanded quietly, the urge to challenge the status quo fueling his words. Perhaps rediscovery began with shedding their self-imposed limits. Sarah leaned into the table, assessing him closely. "What if we turned that guilt into resolve?" she proposed, the flickering kitchen light reflecting the burgeoning sense of possibility in her expression. They could forge a new reality, but it would come at a price: transparency, commitment, and the readiness to confront not just their fears, but each other's. The storm might have muted their hopes, but now, with every word shared, the constraints began to dissolve. The realization that they could build something new stirred an emotional intensity in Mike, filling him with energy. "Are you ready to transform the past into something that empowers us?" he asked, a spark igniting in his chest. The wheels were turning in both their minds, ideas intertwining like vines, anchoring them in a shared journey. The past couldn't be erased, but it could be rewritten. As shadows crept toward the edges of their words, an alarming creak echoed through the house, pulling their attention back to the reality of the storm. It felt like a warning, a reminder that though they were starting to embrace their future, the tempest outside was relentless. Mike's heart raced. "What was that?" he whispered urgently, his previous confidence being pierced by the unseen threat that still loomed high above them. They exchanged glances, an unspoken agreement forming in their eyes. Whatever awaited them would require all of their newfound strength to face. "Let's check it out," Mike suggested, knowing this was not just another blizzard, but a tipping point, both internally and externally. As they reached for the door, the storm seemed to roar back to life, its fury challenging their resolve. This was far from over. They would have to discover if redemption lay beyond the howling winds, or if it was simply another mirage that would slip from their grasp when they needed it most. As Mike turned the doorknob, the wind howled like a wild beast, sending a shiver down his spine. The door swung open, and the chaos outside poured in, a stark reminder that they weren't just battling their past, but were also facing the vicious reality of their circumstances. The biting cold slapped against their faces, and Mike instinctively stepped forward, shielding Sarah from the gusts. Once outside, the biting winds whipped through the air, a frenzy of snowflakes swirling in a chaotic dance. Visibility was minimal, a thick veil of white obscuring whatever lay beyond. Yet, this was not merely a test of their courage, it felt like an urgent call to action. "Stay close," Mike shouted over the din, his voice barely carrying above the storm. They moved cautiously, the crunch of snow giving way to their careful steps. Each footfall felt like a declaration, not just of survival, but of defiance against the shadows lurking within. It was easy to lose focus among the swirling white. The storm itself became a metaphor for his internal upheaval, the nagging doubts, the swirl of regrets, and the icy grip of fear. Suddenly a flash of movement caught Mike's eye. He turned sharply, adrenaline coursing through him as he spotted an object partially buried in snow just a few feet away. It was a child's sled. Instinctively, he felt the pang of anguish and determination. The remnants of laughter echoing in their home had been buried, just like this sled. "Look, Sarah," he called out, pointing. "It's a sign. We can reclaim this space, our lives." She squinted through the storm, her lips parting as she struggled to comprehend. She nodded, stepping beside him, together anchoring to one image of hope, a shared remembrance of joy amidst their turmoil. "Maybe we dig deeper, find other things," she suggested, her previous uncertainty giving way to purpose. "We need to recover what we can." Working side by side, they began to unearth the remnants of their lives, a collection of memories waiting to be revived. Each recovered item ignited a spark within Mike, a resurgence of vitality that fueled his resolve. He recalled the times they had laughed together, the warmth and love before the turbulent waves of their past had surged and swept them away. As they laboriously pulled more objects from the snow, each discovery became a thread linking past happiness to potential renewal. A child's book with frayed edges, a forgotten mitten, and eventually, an old lantern. With every piece unearthed, Mike felt himself shedding the weight of guilt and isolation. It almost felt like a ritual, reclaiming pieces of not just his life, but Sarah's as well. Memories that had been threatened by despair now stood defiantly against the ferocity of the storm. "Mike," Sarah began, her voice shaking not only from the cold but from something deeper. "We can choose to revive this here and now. We can create a safe haven, one that our kids can grow into." Her eyes shone with newfound illumination, understanding and courage interlaced. The reality settled between them. It required effort, but if their life had been a collapsing structure, they could rebuild it stronger, rooted in honesty, resilience, and a mutual commitment. Standing amidst the harsh elements, they recommitted to confronting everything: the past failures, the underestimated strengths and imperfections that were simply part of their journey. As they continued digging, visions of their future crystallized in their minds, abundant laughter echoing through the halls of the home, children playing freely. The burdens of the past finally lifted. Just as they began feeling the warmth of these possibilities, an ominous crack sound erupted from the direction of the house. Mike's heart dropped. Was the storm ravaging their sanctuary while they stood there, lost in dreams? "Get back!" he shouted, grabbing Sarah's arm as they darted for the door. Whatever consequences awaited them inside, Mike knew they had come too far to turn back now. He opened the door, the warmth cascading over them, mingling with the remnants of the chilling storm. Whatever awaited them inside would demand every ounce of the strength they had just begun to discover. But perhaps it was the very crucible that could transform fear into rather a newfound resolve. In that moment of trepidation, he realized that this was not merely about uncovering memories. This was his awakening, a commitment to embracing vulnerability and confronting challenges head-on. The reckoning had started, but what would it yield? As they stepped back inside, closed off from the storm, an unexpected noise echoed from the back of the house. A low rumble that seemed to combine the force of the storm with an impending sense of dread. Only time would tell what they would uncover next, as shadows and light intertwined in their ongoing battle for redemption. The echo of the rumbling noise reverberated in the hallway, wrapping around Mike like a chilling embrace. It was an unsettling reminder that they were not alone within these walls, and the warm cocoon formed by their relief was punctured by a creeping sense of dread. He could feel Sarah's grip tighten around his wrist, her eyes wide and searching his face for answers he didn't fully possess. "Mike." "What was that?" she whispered, her voice cracking slightly under the weight of fear. "I don't know," he replied, suppressing a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. He scanned the interior of their home, now transformed from a familiar sanctuary to a landscape of uncertainty. Each creak and flicker of darkness threatened to pull him back into the weight of past failures, but he refused to give in. "Stay close," he commanded, decisively taking the lead. They edged toward the back of the house, every footfall sinking deeper into the reality of their emergency. With every step, he confronted the doubts whispering at the edges of his resolve. Were they truly prepared to face whatever awaited them? As they approached the source of the rumble, memories flooded Mike's mind. Past moments where fear had dictated his responses, moments where he had retreated instead of faced challenges head-on. He could just as easily retreat now, slip back into the past that had plagued him for so long, but this time he felt something profound pushing back. This time felt different. There was a budding strength intertwined with fear, a duality that fueled him forward. "Mike!" Sarah's voice broke through, laced with urgency. "On 3 we look," he breathed, a plan crystallizing before him. He counted down, steadied himself, and pushed the door open with a decisive shove. The sight before them sent a jolt through Mike's core. A wall of debris had partially collapsed, a reminder of both the storm outside and the emotional aftermath that had built within their lives. Papers scattered across the floor, framed photos askew, but amidst the chaos, there remained one singular focus. A patch of sunlight breaking through the shattered window, casting glimmers of hope across a suffocating array of remnants. "Help me clear this," he urged, the urgency in his tone matching the rapid cadence of his heart. They worked together, their hands digging into the wreckage, driven by a shared determination to reclaim their space. Each item removed became a small triumph. With every cleared piece, he felt the fog of uncertainty lift. But there was more beneath the debris than he had anticipated. As they unearthed what lay hidden, he came across a dusty box. The label had long since faded, but what it represented was unmistakable. A collection of past memories, remnants of decisions that had once seemed less complicated, moments turned sacred by time. "Mike, do you remember this?" Sarah asked, her breath catching as she peered into the box. He did. He remembered their past vibrantly, interlaced with laughter, dreams, and innocence. Extracting a framed photograph of their family from years ago, he felt the corners of his mouth lift, but sorrow quickly chased it down. The weight of the emotions threatened to overwhelm him, not just the nostalgia, but the stark contrast to the disarray around them. "This is who we were," he murmured, a thread of anxiety tying it all together. "Yes, but we can be them again. We just need to fight for it, Mike," Sarah replied with a strength that made him pause. Her words ignited a flicker within him, transforming his sorrow into raw determination. "Let's get to work," he said, reinvigorated. They dug deeper, cataloging memories and pulling out fragments of their shared history, making them tangible once again. It was cathartic, fighting not just against the remnants of their home, but against the shadows of despair that had threatened to consume them. Yet as they toiled away, the rumbling noise arose again, louder this time, shaking the very foundation beneath their feet. This time, Mike stood frozen, engulfed in a whirlwind of conflicting instinct. Should they retreat, or should they press on and confront whatever danger lay ahead? The answer hung in the air like a weight, drawing him toward revelation. Deep down, he knew that choice was his, one that would reveal the strength he had begun to embrace, and as uncertainty flared within him, he realized that to find redemption, he would have to unearth his own courage. "You have to decide, Mike," a voice within whispered. "Are you ready to surge forward?" Taking a breath, he turned to Sarah, her face a mirror of his trepidation, yet a flicker of determination in her eyes urged him on. "We're in this together, no matter what happens," he affirmed, feeling the surge of solidarity course through him. Just then, another loud crack echoed through the house, a visceral reminder of the danger still lurking. Mike's pulse quickened as he met Sarah's gaze, and amid the uncertainty, they both understood. The time had come to face whatever shadows awaited. The storm was only the beginning. As they braced for the unfolding confrontation, Mike's thoughts swirled. Could they really reclaim their lives from the wreckage of their past? The moment felt electric, charged with the intensity of their shared journey. As they took a collective step into the unknown, the ground trembled beneath them, a warning shot, echoing Mike's fierce internal battle. He felt the heat rise in his chest, the amalgamation of dread and resolve twisting into a singular force propelling him forward. Sarah stood beside him, her presence both a comfort and a catalyst. They had faced adversity before, but this was different. This was about reclaiming more than just their home. It was about reclaiming their lives. "Let's move," he urged, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. The thundering noise seemed almost a command, a call to action that resonated deeply within him, igniting an urgency he had long buried under layers of self-doubt. Their bodies moved in synchrony, dredging through the debris that had symbolized so much more than just a physical barrier. Each object they unearthed wasn't mere refuse. It represented fragments of their identity, pieces of the life they had built together. Mike could hear the faintest whisper of doubt trying to creep back in, but he throttled it down. This time, he was prepared to confront that inner voice and silence it for good. As he cleared a particularly heavy beam, Mike's mind raced with possibilities. Each splintered piece of wood reminded him of fragments of his own psyche he had been forced to confront over the years. They were remnants of failures, lost opportunities, and painful choices, each holding him hostage, whispering as if they owned him. He paused, looking at Sarah. Her hands were dirty, her brow furrowed in concentration, but there was light in her eyes. She was still there, fighting. It rooted him in the moment and illuminated the path ahead. Together, he reminded himself as he pressed on, fueled not just by their shared struggle but by the determination to be better. Suddenly a photograph slipped from the box and fluttered to the ground. Mike knelt to retrieve it, recognizing the soon-to-be faded faces staring back at him, their children, laughing at a picnic in the park, radiant with joy and untouched by the strife that had tainted their existence. The image sliced through him, a reminder of what was at stake. He couldn't afford to wallow in nostalgia. It was a call to action. "Everything we've fought for is in this moment," Sarah said, breaking the silence, her voice raw yet resolute. "We have to dig deeper, Mike." Her words reverberated within him. There was a strength he had been too afraid to embrace, but it was right there, raw, pulsating, waiting to be wielded. "We can do this," he said, his tone transitioning into a firm declaration rather than a question. They were not just looking for their past, they were actively crafting their future through every shove and pull of the debris. Just then, the rumbling erupted into a cacophony, a powerful roar, shaking the walls as if the house itself were alive and protesting their interference. Mike felt his pulse quicken, adrenaline coursing through him. "Stay close," he urged again. They clustered together, bracing for what felt like an impending cataclysm, but he couldn't just run away now. The truth settled in his bones. They could adapt, overcome, and forge ahead by harnessing the tumult around them. In that moment of tension and tremendous noise, he glimpsed the kernel of his resilience, bursting forth amid the debris, realizing that singular moments defined not just their recent struggles, but the entirety of their lives. Every challenge faced was a step toward a stronger self, a chance to redefine their narratives. Would they choose vulnerability that paralyzed them, or embrace the daunting task to rebuild? A thought surged through him as he turned to face the chaos beyond the doorway. They could confront the storm. They could harness this moment to reshape their destiny, not just to survive, but to thrive. Mike inhaled deeply, letting the tumult swirl around him, determined to sift through the ashes. This fire would not consume them, it would remake them. The noise hit again, rattling loose the last vestiges of composure. "Come on, Sarah," he said fiercely, pushing through the fear. "Let's face this together." But just as they steeled themselves for the unseen threat, a shadow loomed at the threshold, an ominous figure standing at the edge of clarity and chaos. "Who's there?" Mike shouted, clutching Sarah tightly. Their fight was far from over, and now they were face to face with the unknown. Would this be the moment that defined them, or would they falter at the brink of reclamation? The answer hung in the air, charged with uncertainty and intrigue, crackling with the potential for revelation. Now more than ever, it was time to uncover the depths of their strength, or be consumed by the dark architecture of their isolation. As the figure emerged from the shadows, the tension in the air thickened, a tangible reminder that they stood on the precipice of transformation. Mike's heart raced as recognition flared in his chest. It was the landlord, a stern man burdened by obligations, yet beneath that tough exterior lay a flicker of humanity. "Mike, Sarah," he greeted, his breath visible in the chill. "I came to see if you were all right. Heard the noise from the storm and thought I'd check in." The unexpected presence offered a bold contrast to the chaos that surrounded them. A choice surged within Mike, a chance to fight or to retreat. The memories of doubt resurfaced but were quickly eclipsed by a new flame of determination. This unanticipated ally illuminated an opportunity, a thread of support that broke the fog of isolation enveloping them for far too long. "Thank you for coming," Mike replied, voice resolute, though he felt the weight of vulnerability settle as he acknowledged their interconnectedness. "We're managing, but the storm's left its mark on our home. We need to work together." The landlord nodded, visibly softening as he surveyed the wreckage. "I understand. Maybe this blizzard is nature's way of revealing what's beneath the surface, both in your home and in your lives." In that moment, Mike realized their plight was more than just about survival. It was a recalibration of their relationships, a rallying call to bridge the divides. Vulnerability began to reshape into a beacon of hope. They weren't alone in this fight. They could lean on each other. As if sensing the shift, Sarah stepped forward. "We're looking to rebuild, not just the physical space, but the connection between us all. And we know the past still lingers, but we want to create a home our kids can thrive in." Her words resonated within Mike. This wasn't a mere reconstruction. It was a reclamation of identity, aspirations defined by action and accountability. He saw how fear melted away as they stood united against the elements, and he realized they were crafting a narrative woven with possibility. "You have the right perspective," the landlord responded, surprise flickering through his expression. "Sometimes you measure a home not by its walls, but by the bonds that tie its inhabitants together." With renewed resolve, they worked in unison. The landlord, Mike, and Sarah cleared debris side by side, their hands intertwining to strengthen the foundations of their futures. "I've got equipment," the landlord said, as they uncovered doors and tools from the wreckage. "I'll help you fix the roof and get the utilities running again. This could transform not just your home, but our neighborhood." From that moment, Mike felt the layers of despair peel away, replaced with an intoxicating sense of empowerment. Action conquered fear, and solidarity eclipsed isolation. With every nail driven into place and every board replaced, they breathed new life into the home. They weren't just mending a structure. They were fortifying their bonds and illuminating a path toward a brighter shared future. Each task felt monumental. It was more than work. It was a testament to their resilience, a reclamation of identity, not defined by the storms, but rather the battles they chose to face, hand in hand. As the blizzard began to relent outside, the metamorphosis within those walls became palpable. Mike turned to Sarah, who was now radiating a kind of strength he hadn't noticed before. She had shed her old skin of doubt and worry. "We can navigate the storms together," he affirmed, finding confidence in their symbiosis, reinstating a delicate balance between vulnerability and strength. "The foundation is sound," he added, gesturing at the progress they made. "This is where we'll build something new for our children, a space of love and resilience." Sarah's eyes sparkled with emotion, mirroring the hope that skated through the air like the slowly melting snow outside. "Yes, and we'll do it by supporting each other, celebrating our strengths, and allowing ourselves room to stumble." The room echoed with a shared laughter, their fears swiftly disintegrating into the warmth of possibility. With the landlord's help, they tackled one challenge after another, triumph becoming the backdrop to their newfound unity. Moments of frustration were filled with light-hearted banter. Laborious repairs became tales of resilience. By the time they dusted themselves off, the blizzard had turned into a gentle snowfall, illuminating the world outside as if gracing them with a clean slate. Standing in unity as equal partners, they finally stood before the remains of their home. It was more than just walls and windows. It was a sanctuary forged in the fires of adversity, one that would shelter laughter, sorrow, and shared victories instead of despair. As dusk settled into a peaceful calm, Mike surveyed the room with gratitude washing over him. Each crack reflected courage, every corner, the commitment they made. He had emerged from that storm stronger, more compassionate, aware that transformation bloomed from embracing chaos. Turning to Sarah, he simply whispered, "We did this. Together." "Yes, together," she echoed, a soft smile crossing her lips as if they had rewritten their destinies, transforming the narrative of fear into one of triumph. In that moment, as both remnants of the past and architects of the future intertwined, Mike understood the significance of this journey. They had navigated not only the physical storm, but also the labyrinth of their hearts, proving that in vulnerability, they found strength, and in unity, unwavering hope. Now, with the world outside anew, their lives could begin again, just as vibrant, just as fierce, but now undoubtedly connected in their shared humanity. This was home, where hope flourished amid the chaos, captured not just in the framework of a structure, but in the delicate lace of trust that bound them together. And it was time to embrace their story, one filled with promise and infinite possibilities. You need to subscribe now to not miss out on future exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this powerful ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.